Well, Elon Musk has been in the spotlight for several years now, or at least a decade. And in the recent year, he's even more in the spotlight. A while back, he had purchased Twitter, and it changed into X, and he's very vocal on X. And then he put his support behind President Trump and his campaign. He announced that he was a quote unquote dark MAGA, and so now President Trump has apparently appointed Elon Musk as heading up a new department called the Government or Department of Government Efficiency. And so this is quite a story that we're all watching unfold before us. Now, what I'm going to do today is we're going to be taking a look at the astrology chart of Elon Musk. We're going to be doing a little bit of a general analysis on the chart, just a really quick analysis. Then we're going to go into the near future here with what's going to be happening with this government or Department of Government Efficiency. I keep getting the words twisted there, but we're going to kind of get a look at that just to see what's going on there. What does the astrology chart say about that? Now, what I discovered, and I'm going to give you a little preview right now, is that there's a shocking transformation that's going to be taking place at the end of March. And we saw that within Trump's chart and also JD Vance's chart. So there's a lot of uh, different forces or different charts suggesting that there's going to be a crisis of some sort. And Elon's is going to be adding more fuel to that proverbial fire. So we're going to be taking a look at that today. For those of you that are new to my channel, make sure you like and subscribe. By the way, I do practice Vedic sidereal astrology with my own twist, of course. So you'll notice the chart looks a little different. Your sign may be different using this method if you go to one of those online calculators. If you're interested in a private reading, check down below for details. And also, this reading is astrology reading is for entertainment purposes only. All these statements about Elon Musk, well, these are all my interpretation of the astrological data. So there's a couple questions I want to ask that we're going to kind of talk about in the beginning here. So Elon, he advocated for the Trump presidency on his platform. He was really big behind Trump on the X platform, and then he's getting a big role. It was announced him, and I believe there's someone else that's joining with him for this Department of Government Efficiency. So he says he's going to be cutting a lot. There's going to be a lot of changes. So we're going to kind of see what this all suggests. So some of the questions we're going to be asking with this astrology reading, insights in the birth chart. We're going to take a quick look at that near future for Elon. And then we're going to look at any indications of how this new administration is going to be. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. So first, let's go ahead and pull up the astrology chart of Elon just to take a look at what's going on there. We're going to bring up the astrology chart. By the way, I found that the birth time on a well-known astrology website, and they have it they got the birth time from some sort of biographical source, so it does appear to be pretty good. And the chart actually kind of makes sense for who Elon is. So, for example, he's a Gemini ascendant here, and he's got Mercury in the first house. I mean, he's very analytical. I mean, we would think of him, especially, growing up, and he's into these computer games. I think he helped set up like PayPal and different things in the beginning. We would think of him as kind of a nerd, right? So we'd think he'd be pretty intelligent, pretty smart. And with being a Gemini, so he's very curious. And then he's also very articulate, very smart. But not only, he might be a little bit of a nerd, or people might think of him that way, but he's got Sun in the first house, which there's a certain amount of charisma there. So, I mean, for the last decade, all I've been hearing about is Elon in the media. I mean, we heard about Elon with Tesla, then with SpaceX, and then with X, and now with this Trump presidency. It's like we can't escape Elon's face being in the news, and that's how important he's become in this in this reality we're in. So, He's quite influential. Sun in the first house, that's going to give you charisma, leadership qualities, things like that. Now, there's also some downsides in the chart too, so it's not entirely, entirely peaceful. He's got, for example, Moon in the third house, and the third house has to do with entrepreneurship, business. Well, that's what he's pretty much been involved in, as far as we know, with the PayPal, SpaceX. All this is business. He's got a lot of business acumen with Moon being in the third house. It could also show his mother is has a lot of business acumen as well because of Moon being in the third house. He might have a pretty good relationship with the mother because of the third house can represent like a very conversational mother, a mother that calls you a lot or messages you a lot. So that would be pretty good for it. Now there is a Mars aspect on that, so the definitely a lot of the ambition and drive that Elon has is could be attributed to the mother, and the mother may be very ambitious as well. I noticed that Elon takes his mother to some of these events, so that's interesting. So the other thing I'm going to point out is Rahu Ketu in Elon's chart, and we're going to focus on Rahu because K2 is the end of the spectrum where there's a detachment. K2 being in the second house, by the way, it could show someone that's actually they're detached to things like material wealth. And I think he's even made statements like that. Yes, he's the world richest person, but and I think he keeps on trading spaces with Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. I don't know, but Elon's up there with the richest, people. But it shows he's not really attached to it. He actually, honestly, might be somebody that he just likes doing what he does, and it just makes him a lot of money doing it because of K2 shows detachment. Second house is like saved assets, things like that. So there's a certain amount of detachment there. Also, there may be a certain level of detachment, even though he's got a mother that calls him a lot. When K2's in the second house, by the way, can represent a certain detachment from the family. Like it's like more of an apathy. Like it's not super important to the native that has second K2 in the second house. Sometimes it can show long separations from the family of origin. So at least like some sort of emotional detachment could be indicated with K2 in the second house. Now, Rahu in the eighth house, this is what's so interesting about his chart is he's got Rahu with Mars. And those of us, that have watched Elon over the years, his big thing is he wants to go to Mars. And he always wears this t-shirt that says Occupy Mars. Rahu shows what we're trying to achieve in this life, right? It shows why we reincarnate. And so literally he wants to occupy Mars. That would be Rahu with Mars. He wants to embody Mars. And not only that is Mars is exalted in the sign of Capricorn. So this Mars energy in his chart is so massively like inflated. I mean, we got Mars in its exaltation sign, then we got Rahu next to it, which is like again, that's like pouring gasoline on Mars. It's like adding even more acceleration. So his Mars energy, and we're going to find out in this reading, the Mars energy is like way over here. It's extreme, and then the Venus energy is not so, not so balanced. Usually within a person, you want to have an equal balance of Mars and Venus. So Venus represents, our feminine side, feminine energy, but it also represents our sense of diplomacy, getting along with others. So Mars can be so overly ambitious that Mars could become pushy. Mars could become domineering. Mars could become very, hard to get along with. So that's the thing about this chart. But Mars in the astrology chart, and by the way, it's in the eighth house. I don't remember if I pointed that out. It could show somebody that they are obsessed with innovation, new technologies. So, I mean, we got Tesla, we got SpaceX wanting to go to Mars. We got the whole Neuralink thing. We got the Android, the robots that are coming out. It's just, this is like innovation times, 1,000. He's so focused on this. Rahu in the eighth house is going to show somebody that's also interested in things like life extension technologies, the mysteries of life. So that's interesting. So that's where all this drive goes through. But the eighth house is also very dangerous. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. It's in one of the slides that I'm going to show you. But the eighth house can be one of those things where you may get in over your head. You may think that you're really wanting to innovate, but then you're getting a hold of some power that's not, humanity is not ready for yet. So that's one of the it can be a little bit of a dangerous game you're playing if you innovate too much in the eighth house. And there's too much of a push there because it could be acquiring power too fast. Jupiter in the sixth house definitely has a lot of enemies. Remember, Jupiter, it does expand things. So Jupiter's a good planet, but in the sixth house, it shows there's a lot of enemies. There's a lot of jealous people. There's a lot of people that are, throwing up obstacles, things like that. He's got Saturn in with Venus in the 12th house. The Saturn, now Venus is in its own sign of Taurus. However, Saturn's with it, and Saturn is, so Saturn is suppressing Venus a little bit. There's a little bit of a difficulty there. That's why I said the Venusian Indian or Venusian energy is being kind of like overshadowed by this like responsibility. So, for example, he may want to, 12th house represents like retreat, reflection, things like that. He may want to go on a retreat. He may would like to take some time off, go on sabbatical. Maybe deep down he does, because he's got Venus there in its own sign. But Saturn's not letting him. Saturn's like, nope, no solitude, no rest, no relaxation for you. So that's one of the difficulties with this placement. Now I'm going to pull up the slide and just make sure there could be something I didn't mention. But that's kind of a little bit of a brief overview with Elon's chart. The one thing that the big takeaway for me is Mars is just so intensely amplified, where I almost think it could be a little bit dangerous because the innovation could be coming too fast, with some of these developments where humanity's not ready. So like when we're thinking about AI and innovation, a lot of people think that the automation, the AI is it's all good, but if you go into it too fast and then you have a lot of people lose their jobs and people don't have jobs anymore, well, okay, that's going to cause a really rough transition unless we can have a well organized plan and maybe slow it down a little bit. So he may be kind of too ambitious where he doesn't think about the broader implications of what is going on. Okay, so that's a possibility. Now, here's a few pointers about the chart. He's Gemini ascendant. They're curious. The rising nakshatra, by the way, is Punarvasu. That's one of the 27 nakshatras in Vedic astrology. This is somebody who's very philosophical, abstract thought, definitely abstract thought. If you think of everything he's interested in, going to space, Mars, the Neuralink thing, it's definitely these new ideas. Sun in the first house, he's charismatic, magnetism. Mercury in first house, intelligent, witty. Rahu in the eighth house, he's attracted to mysteries, life extension, secrets, healing, even occult power. And this is interesting. I don't take Elon as like a very religious person. And I haven't read anything about him being a religious person. He may be, but Rahu in the eighth house is like somebody that may be interested in occult power. And the thing about it was when during this campaign, when he came out and he had his whole dark MAGA thing, kind of made me think, is there something going on there? And I think maybe some of you all thought that as well, this whole dark MAGA thing. Rahu with Mars is occupy Mars, innovative, pioneer, push forward. Mars exalted in Capricorn. He's got a lot of discipline, ambition, energy. He probably doesn't sleep a lot. Jupiter in the sixth, it multiplies the enemies. Remember, let's go to the next slide here. So I find it also interesting. The other thing, and I didn't talk about this when we were looking at the chart, was Saturn and Venus in the 12th house. That's the same as Donald Trump. He's got Saturn and Venus in the 12th house, which I find quite interesting. Now, one of the things I notice is I feel like it might be difficult for Elon to compromise and find middle ground when Venus is afflicted by Saturn, even though it's in its own house. Saturn there can prevent like create a heavy load of responsibility, delays, setbacks in trying to find a compromise. Okay. Because Mars is wanting to push forward. Definitely, I'd get the sense that this person is somebody who doesn't like regulation or red tape, or somebody who doesn't like to be told no. Definitely. So he's got a very strong will. He could be come off as too domineering to people. So there could be some personality conflicts there, like just in his businesses, in his life with people. There could be some, because he may have a very domineering kind of energy where he feels like he knows what he needs to be done. And, people just better get with the program. That definitely could be something. And then Sun is in the first house. So remember, there's a sense of like, uh, you know, there's a sense of like this person is, they know it, they have a willpower, they have a strong willpower. Sun in first house, Saturn in 12th house, there's not a lot of time for isolation. But the thing is retreat is probably something he would need to go on. It's something we all need when you think about, and I'm just going to stop this for just a second. The 12th house gets a bad rap. The 12th house is not a very materializing house. The 12th house is like retreat, ashrams. It's not all about making money. It's not all about fame, getting married to an attractive spouse, having a nice house. The 12th house is like literally losing everything and just being spiritual and connecting with the divine and just losing your material identity. But the 12th house is the way that people spiritually advance. It helps you advance in your next incarnation. It's through the 12th house and through the ninth house. You don't advance to your next incarnation or have a better incarnation on more of the material things. It's all that work you do with the ninth house and the 12th house that really advance your incarnational goals. So, materially wise, we kind of, people tend to dismiss it. Moon in the sign of Leo by at the bottom of the slide, I wanted to say somebody who's comfortable with fame. So that's something to discuss as well. And definitely he is in the spotlight, and I do think he rather enjoys being in the spotlight. Let's talk about the planetary timeline here. Remember, in Vedic astrology, we do something called the Vimshatari Dasha system, which is essentially, during periods of your life, you're always going to be in a planetary timeline. Now, the planetary timeline that Elon's on right now, he's in Rahu. That's the major period. So Rahu, Mahadasha, and then he's in Venus, Antardasha. He's going to be in this Rahu Venus period from November 2023 to November 2026. So it's a 3-year period. He's going to continue to be in this period for the next, during the early stages of this Trump presidency. So let's go ahead. I'm going to pull up a slide and we'll talk about that. Let's talk about Rahu first, because Rahu's the major period, which is the less dense energy. And then we'll talk about Venus. But then at the end, I'm going to tell you, we're going to talk about something, the Saturn transit that's coming up, which is called Ashtama Shani. And this is a really big deal. And this is what Elon's going to be entering in March. So this is going to give us a little bit of a picture of what's going on with Elon in a few months here. So let's go ahead and pull up the astrology chart on the planetary timeline, which is Rahu Venus. Now, Rahu period, by the way, it's 2012 to 2030. It's 18 years long. And then the sub period he's in is Venus. So remember, when you're in the major period, you're going through 9 of the sub periods through that major timeline. So Rahu, let's talk about Rahu for a moment. So that's the major period. So Rahu's always going to be influencing. That's why this is such a time of him being in the spotlight. It's all about Rahu. Rahu's the time of, this is the time. He wants all those things. He wants to go to Mars. He wants the Neuralink. He wants the robots. He wants just all those things. That's Rahu that's doing all that stuff. So from 2012 to 2030, he's in this period. So Rahu, but Rahu's a trickster. Remember, Rahu can get us. The old myth is Rahu can get in over its head. So Rahu wants to join the realm of the gods, and then Rahu gets in over his head because he hasn't earned those achievements or entitlements. He kind of gets there through trickery or by taking shortcuts. So that's the danger with Rahu. Rahu's like, we're doing things through shortcuts. We're doing things through trickery. We're not doing things in the right way. So, there could be some of that going on as far as, when we're talking about energetically. So somebody who's maybe pushing too fast, push, 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 maybe not like putting the brakes. Remember, that's what I said earlier was maybe we're not putting enough brakes on it. Hey, we got to slow down. We got to make sure that, everything's going good. We got to make sure we test these things a little more. We got to make sure we kind of slow everything down. But there's this push like, I want to get to Mars. I want to get to Mars like now. So that's the dangerous side. So he's got to be careful. He's got to make sure that he really does his due diligence when he's in the Rahu period. But yeah, Rahu in the eighth house. But also, I do want to point out that Rahu, just because it's in the eighth house and with Mars, this could represent like explosive events happening. So, in a general way, this could just be an intense, transformative time. Let's go back to the slide there and talk about that for just a moment. So Rahu's creating fascination with access to secrets. So maybe even entering the political sphere like he did. There's just wanting to know secrets, wanting to know these things. Rahu's creating the drive to innovate and pioneer because it's with Mars. Like I said, though, Rahu can bite off more than it, may bite off more than it can chew and get in over its head. The intense drive to innovate at all costs can have grave consequences if done too quickly or without the maturity to handle such power. Now, when we talk about the eighth house can represent like the power of the universe, like the fundamental power of the universe. Like if you were to discover that, if you were like a wizard or a Merlin and you discovered the secret of the universe where you could manipulate reality, that's what the eighth house is. So when Rahu's there, it's like we're really trying to figure this out, but we might get in an overhead. So, I'm giving the examples of the AI, Neuralink, the robots, the push to go to Mars. So, for example, even if we look at something like Neuralink, where essentially, and I'm really, I'm really simplifying this. I get it, but you want to like add a neural link to someone's brain to give them more abilities or something, but maybe we're not at a stage. Maybe it would be for someone to have that much computing power in their brain or that much access to information, and that gets to somebody who it doesn't have very good motivations. Maybe this could be a really bad thing to give somebody that kind of superpower. Like maybe we should really be slowing this down, make sure it's only empathetic people that have a certain amount of ethical code that get these enhancements that are giving them this power to just have all this knowledge and things like that. It makes me think of that movie The Matrix, when they would plug people in and they would get those downloads to those different programs. Now, I don't know what Neuralink is actually doing. I know that Elon's talked about wanting to like increase almost like the bandwidth of how much information you can take in, or something along those lines. Comment down below if you know a little bit more about that. But essentially, now there's some beneficial applications in Neuralink. Don't get me wrong. When we think about like helping people that have issues, health wise, so there's definitely some promise there. But there's also, it could also go in a negative way too. So let's talk about the Venus period. Let me put that chart back up. So November 2023 to November 2026, he's in a Venus period. Venus rules politics and political relationships because it rules the fifth house in the astrology chart. Let's go take a look at that. So but I wanted to point out one thing about this Venus period that I find is kind of interesting. It's in the 12th house, but remember, I feel like it's being blocked by Saturn. So maybe there's a desire to go on retreat, but it's still not happening, even though it typically would represent that since it's in the 12th house. But it rules the fifth house, which is the fifth house is politics and fame. Okay. So that is definitely creativity, is also the fifth house as well. Now, the thing about it is Venus, we could still represent, the 12th house is still active in some way, though. I just want everyone to understand that. So, for example, he may have all these ideas about what he wants to do with this new Department of Government Efficiency, but there's going to be a lot of delays and setbacks and losses because the 12th house represents losses. Like, for example, this could be an example, like if he's looking at the government budget and he wants to make all these cuts. Let's say he wants to go ahead and cut all this stuff and just balance the budget. But then, it's not just him that makes those decisions. We got the Congress, we got all these people and these political factors that could be frustrating. So it might be that there's still a budget where there's losses involved. That's what it could represent with Venus being the 12th house, that it's still getting the delays, that it's not as he finds out the government is not as efficient as he wants it to be. Ironically, he's in the Department of Government Efficiency, but he might find out how inefficient it is. So that could be part of the issue there. There's definitely a sense of losses. There could actually be losses to his own finances during this time as well. One of the things about going into government service is, especially if he's really busy with that, he could actually end up devoting more time to government service, which government service doesn't pay a whole lot of money. So he could actually lose a little bit. Now, I don't think he's going to lose a lot, but definitely there could be losses on that account. So that's something to consider. Now, Saturn's being activated, okay, but because Venus, we have to look at these together when we're looking at the planetary period. So when Venus is active, Saturn's being active too. So it's just interesting to note that Saturn is activating eighth and ninth house in the astrology chart. Well, it's activating eighth house, which could be explosive events, transformation. Remember, Mars is exalted and Rahu's there, so this could be really intense situations. And then, if we look over at the moon chart over here, it rules 6 from moon, so there's a lot of enemies. There can be definitely some conflict happening and some intense events here. Now, I'm going to give you more of a date. I do feel like there is a crisis that's going to be coming up during this whole next administration and in Elon's life. I do feel like there's going to be a crisis because he's going to be going through something called Ashtama Shani. Let's talk about that. Let me pull up the chart again. This is a major transit. When people talk about some of the most difficult planetary situations that people go through, usually they talk about, like, if you're in a K2 dasha, that can be difficult. Rahu, anytime you're in a node period, it can be difficult. And then the other one is either Sati Sati, when Saturn's going over your natal moon, or when Saturn's transiting eighth from your moon. And that's what Ashtama Shani is. So let's talk about that. Shani means a Saturn in Sanskrit. So Ashtama Shani. Okay. This is when, and look, this is the moon right here. So we'll make that the first house. Let's count 8 houses from it. 6, 7, 8. This is when Saturn transits your 8 houses from your moon. It's called Ashtama Shani. Now, when Saturn transit eight houses from your moon, which it's going to do in Elon's chart starting in March, it can be difficult. Okay, there's a lot of factors. It's basically an emotional crisis that someone can come, but it's also physically expressed in the person's reality. So this is going to be interesting. Now, we do need to take note of the house. The eighth from moon is going to be the 10th house, and that has to do with government. So that's one thing to point out. Now, let me go ahead and pull up the slide for a moment because it's going to explain the dates of this Ashtama Shani, which is super important. So the Ashtama Shani, very difficult time. Usually people are in survival mode. Usually they feel stuck. Usually they feel frozen. And, Elon Musk is a very public figure. He's got a lot of resources. So maybe it's going to be experienced by him in a different way than it would like the average person. But it's still going to be experienced nonetheless. So this transit, this is going to start when Saturn enters the sign of Pisces, and that's going to be March 29, 2025. That's only going to be about a month or two, about 2 months after this new Trump presidency, when Trump gets sworn in. This is only 2 months later that he's entering this Ashtama Shani. So that's interesting. And remember, I already tied this in to Donald Trump and JD Vance's chart. So in Trump and JD Vance's chart, when Saturn goes in the Pisces in March of 2025, it's going to be entering the 8th house of their D1 chart. So not eighth from moon, but their eighth house of their D1, their main chart from their ascendant. So I'm looking at this. We're getting a lot of confluence here. We got Trump, we got JD Vance, Saturn's entering eighth house, which could represent crisis. And then we have Saturn entering eighth from moon, which is Ashtama Shani in March of 2025. So looks like there's some sort of crisis that's taking place around that time. And to see it's happening with three different people with that's kind of interesting. It's you know, it could definitely just happen in one person's chart, you know, when they're having a personal crisis at home maybe or something like that. But all three of their charts, it's got me definitely it's piquing my interest that all three of their charts are having this eighth house energy. Let's go back to the slide here. So this is an emotional crisis that's physically expressed in one's reality. So Moon is in the third house and it's aspected by Mars. This is also this could represent also transformation of the mother, by the way, while this transit's happening too. So there could be some Elon's mother maybe in the news a lot during this period. Business. So the third house has to do with like business ventures, entrepreneurship. There may be a lot of issues with like the businesses and maybe too many meetings. The third house can represent being busy with lots of meetings and not enough time. So he's going to feel stuck in that, the third house. He's going to feel stuck in that environment. When you're in the Ashtam Shani, it's like you feel like it's almost like you feel like you're in a mental prison. Like you're stuck in the environment where your moon is in. So your moon is in the third house. You feel stuck in the third house. There's all these meetings. You're too busy, not enough time. Your head is going like, you know, your mind is racing through all these shots because our thoughts, because the third house represents the mind. So there's so many thoughts going on. His third house is aspected by Mars. So it's like in hyperdrive during this period. And then Saturn's going to be transiting the 10th house of the D1 chart. So remember, it's transiting 8 houses in the moon chart, eighth from moon, but in the D1 chart, it's the 10th house. So the 10th house is what's having the transformation. So that's something to clarify there. The 10th house can represent changes in the government, really big, like catastrophic changes in the government. So that's what I want you to realize. Ashtama Shani can represent something like destructive changes and a rebirth. So this could be even more. I mean, we're thinking like Department of Government Efficiency. This could be radical change, radical events that are causing massive changes in the government, massive changes in leadership that are happening around this time. And it could be from events, and it could be from events outside of his control. I mean, we tend to want to assume it's going to be Department of Government Efficiency, and maybe that's part of it. But also keep in mind the Venus period that he's in, it's in the 12th house. So something could be originating as something happening in foreign lands. Okay, something in a foreign land. Remember, Donald Trump's in a Venus period and his Venus is in the 12th house. So the issue could originate on the world stage, and this kind of causes this situation or crisis that's emerging. So that's interesting. We're seeing this huge government transformation during the 2.3 years in Elon's chart. And remember that Ashtama Shani is going to be March 2025 to June of 2027. So there's massive changes happening around that time. It's going to be a difficult period for sure. The other thing I want to add about Ashtama Shani is emotionally, it just feels like everything is stuck and you're not able to move forward in your life. Like you feel stuck in time. And so Elon may feel like he's stuck. So, for example, with some of his businesses, they may hit like delays or obstacles where they're stuck. Like maybe the mission to Mars gets stuck on some sort of issue where they got to find out some sort of solution and it gets stuck. So during that 2 years, there's this feeling of stuckness. Because remember, the third house where the moon's at is businesses too. So this is going to be a really interesting time. I'm a little bit worried because we got all these eighth house energies that are happening. It's a time of much needed transformation, but that much needed transformation can sometimes come at a very inconvenient time as well. So let me know what you think down below in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Of course, let me know Who else, whose charts you'd want me to look at as well, anyone else's. Take care until I see you in the next video.